this evening's meeting to order. This is the regular city council meeting for Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilman Bembas.
Here.
Councilman Carter.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
Here.
Mayor Gillis.
Here.
Councilwoman Harris.
Here.
Councilwoman Meldrum.
Here.
Councilman Scarlett.
Here.
Four present.
Have a moment of silent prayer. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I would just like to send, thoughts and condolences to the family of Tim Raymond.
Yes, I think we all would.
Great guy.
Can I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now to the most exciting part of our evening. We have our annual audit presentation from McBride Manley. We
Yay.
have Curtis McBride here. Mr. McBride, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. As introduced, my name is Curtis McBride. I'm a CPA from McBride Manley & Company. With me this evening is Amy Delia. She was instrumental in our engagement team for the audit this year. So we're here to present the results of our audit for the City of Elginak for the period ending June 30, 2024. Now, I believe all of you have a copy of my presentation in front of you, a hard copy, if you'd like to follow along that way. Before I get into the slides, I first want to talk about our audit opinion, which should be contained in that bound document you have that's roughly 60 or 70 pages. So there are three types of opinions you can receive from your auditor. The first type is what we call a clean or unmodified audit opinion, which means that we believe the financial statements are fairly stated and they're in compliance with our professional standards. The second type of opinion is what we call a qualified opinion, which means that for the most part they're in compliance, but there may be a few exceptions to that. And then the third type of opinion is what we call an adverse opinion. That means that we do not believe the financial statements are accurate and they are not in compliance with our standards. So I am pleased to announce that the city did receive a clean or unmodified opinion from our firm for the period ending June 30, 2024. Just to clarify that opinion, we're not providing an opinion on the financial health of the city. That's not the focus of our audit. It's to provide an opinion over the accuracy of the financial records and financial statements. So moving on to the next slide. The first fund I want to talk about is the general fund. The general fund primarily derives its revenues from property taxes, state shared revenues, and federal, state, and local grants. So here we're looking at the computation of the fund balance for the general fund. So you can see the general fund had about $4,790,000 of total assets on hand at the end of the year. It had about $886,000 of liabilities against those assets. So it finished June 30, 2024 with an ending fund balance level of about $3.9 million. I'll talk about the fund balance level in a little bit more detail in a subsequent slide, but you did finish at $3.9 million in general. On the next slide. So here we're looking at the general fund statement of revenues and expenditures. This is the income statement for the general fund. So here we're comparing 2024 to 2023. So you can see your general fund generated about $3,183,000 of revenues in 2023, and it generated about $3,685,000 in 2024. So you can see you've had some increases in revenues. You see property tax revenues increased from 23 to 24. Distributions from the state of Michigan also increased, so that's your state revenue sharing. That went from $535,000 up to $548,000. you can see interest revenue is a big one. So you can see you generated about $42,000 of interest in 2023, and that jumped up to about $118,000 in 2024. We all know interest rates went up during 2024, so that explains why your interest revenue went up. Focusing solely on 2024, as I mentioned, you generated about $3,685,000 of revenues. You spent about $3 million in general, so you had an increase to your general fund balance level of about $685,000 for the year ending June 30, 2024. Moving on to the next slide. So here, looking specifically at the revenues, as I mentioned, total revenues did increase during the year. So as I mentioned, property taxes went from $1,628,000 up to $1,772,000 in 2024. Now, just to clarify, that's not because property tax rates increased, because they did not. Property tax rates did not increase. That's because taxable values throughout the city increased from 2023 to 2024. Again, as I mentioned previously, distributions from the state revenue sharing increased. And then when you look at the pie chart, that really drives the point home that your general fund is primarily supported by property taxes and your state revenue sharing. So you can see those two revenues account for about 63% of revenues in general. So your general fund is heavily dependent on those two revenue sources. Moving on to the next slide. Looking at the expenditures by type, again comparing 23 to 24. Total expenditures also increased, just like revenues. You can see you spent about $2,861,000 back in 2023. You spent about $3 million in 24 in your general fund. So that's about a $139,000 increase in expenditures. You can see that general government expenditures increased from $744,000 up to $818,000. So the general government would be the city manager's department, the city clerk, the treasurer, and the general administrative expenditures of the city would be part of the general government. You can see public safety expenditures increased from about $1,419,000 up to about $1,470,000. You can see public safety increased, and public works also increased from about $503,000 up to about $518,000. Looking at the pie chart, you can see that the general government, public safety, and public works, those three departments make up about 93% of expenditures in your general fund. And you would expect that. A city that has, in your case, contracted police services and a fire department and a DPW, which are very labor-intensive departments, you would expect those departments to have a large portion of your expenditures. That's normal in a city like the city of Algonac. Moving on to the next slide. The next two funds I want to talk about briefly are the street funds. So here are the major and local streets. These are a little bit different from the general fund in that these are what we refer to as special revenue funds. So we call them special revenue funds because their fund balances are restricted for a special purpose. And that's for the maintenance and construction of streets throughout the city. So these funds can't be used for general operating purposes. They have to be used in these funds, stay within these funds and be used for streets. So looking at the balance sheet, starting with the Major Street, you can see Major Street had about $1,292,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year, about $3,000 of liabilities against the assets to finish the year with an ending fund balance level of about $1,289,000. Local Streets had about $945,000 of assets on hand, about $7,000 of liabilities against the assets to finish the year with an ending fund balance level of about $938,000. The one thing I forgot to mention, these two funds primarily derive their revenues from distributions from the state of Michigan, from MDOT. So you receive MDOT distributions throughout the year, and that funds the major and local streets. Moving on to the next slide. So looking at the income statement for the major and local streets for 2024, starting with Major Streets, you can see the Major Street Fund generated about $412,000 of revenues. And again, the majority of that's from distributions from Michigan, about $390,000. You spent about $269,000 in major streets. So you had an increase to your fund balance in major streets of about $143,000. Local streets, you generated about $397,000. You spent about $207,000, so you also had an increase to local streets of about $190,000. I wanna point out a couple of things here while we're on this slide. You can see in major streets, there's transfers to other funds of $195,000, and then you see in local street, in the revenue side, there's a transfer from other funds for $195,000. That's because under Public Act 51 of 1951, which is what governs these funds, your major street fund is allowed to transfer up to 50% of its MDOT revenues over to local streets to help subsidize that fund. So you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to transfer some major street funds over to local streets, and you did do that during the 23-24 fiscal year. Also in the streets, you did have a couple of projects going on during this year. So you had some work on Robbins Street, and then the Gulf View project was also going on during the 23-24 fiscal year. Moving on to the next slide. So I have a few slides here where we look at some trend analysis. Starting with the state revenue trends. So the middle column is the state revenue sharing. So these are the distributions that go into the general fund each year. And then over in the right column is distributions to the street funds. That's the MDOT funding that goes into the major and local streets. Here we're going back to 2017. So you can see you generated about $401,000 in state revenue sharing in 2017. That jumped up over $470,000 for 2021. And as I mentioned previously, you generated about $547,000 of state revenue sharing during 24. So you see a positive or upward trend here in state revenue sharing from 2017 through 2024. You see a similar relationship here with your MDOT distributions. You can see you received about $337,000 in 2017. It jumped up over $478,000 for 2021, and you received about $546,000 in distributions to the streets during 2024. Again, a positive or upward trend here in state revenue trends. Moving on to the next slide. Here we're looking at property tax revenues. Again, going back to 2017, you can see that you generated about $1,230,000 in property taxes in 2017. It went up over $1.4 million in 2021, and as I mentioned in a previous slide, you generated about $1,772,000 in 2024 in property taxes. Now I'm going to repeat what I said before. That's not because property tax rates have increased. They have not. That's because taxable values in the city have increased from 2017 to 2024. Now, what's really interesting about this is that, believe it or not, if I took this all the way back to 2009, the 2009 fiscal year, the city actually generated about $1,615,000 back in 2009. And you can see it generated about the same level of property taxes in 2023 at about $1,628,000. So that is primarily due to the limitations placed on property taxes in the state of Michigan. So there are caps placed on the increase. So you have Proposal A, which places a cap on the increase on individual properties, and then you have the Headley Amendment, which comes in and places that same limit on the city as a whole. So what happened is, back in 2010, housing values declined sharply. And so taxable values followed suit, and so did property taxes. There are no limits or caps on the decline in property taxes in a given year, only on the increase. So when you have a year with a sharp decline, due to the limits on the increases, it takes a long time to recover from that. So it literally has taken the city about 14 or 15 years to climb out of the hole that it experienced back in the 2010 fiscal year. This is not a situation that's unique to the city of Algonac. Most municipalities in the state of Michigan also experience the same issue. Moving on to the next slide. Here we're looking at the historical fund balance trend for your general fund. Again, going back to 2017, you can see you finished 2017 with about a $919,000 fund balance level in general. You finished 2021 with about just under a $2.7 million fund balance. And as I mentioned previously, for the year ending June 30, 2024, you finished with about a $3.9 million fund balance level. Now, to put all this into perspective, the state of Michigan has recently, they've been really good at publishing information to compare where you stand with other municipalities in the state of Michigan. It does lag a couple of years behind, but what the state of Michigan has found is that the median fund balance level of all governments in the state of Michigan, when you look at their fund balance as a percentage of total revenues, they found that the median was about 118%. To put that into perspective, at the end of June 30, 2024, you were at about 106% of annual revenues in your general. Now, to get even more specific, they also broke it down by municipal type. So they looked at cities, villages, townships, even counties, and what they published is that the median fund balance levels of all cities was only 49% though. So the median fund balance levels of all cities, at least back in 2022, when you look at fund balance in relation to total revenues, was at about 49%. So again, at the period ending June 30, 2024, you were at about 106% of annual revenues in your general fund balance level. So you were right at about the median fund balance levels of all governments, but higher than the median fund balance levels of cities throughout the state of Michigan. Moving on to the next slide. The next two funds I want to talk about briefly are the water and sewer funds. These are what we refer to as proprietary or enterprise funds. So we call them enterprise funds because they're actually accounted for similar to a for-profit private business. And that's because the city owns the water and sewer system and then charges the users for the use of those systems. Theoretically, these are supposed to be self-sustaining funds. So this is the statement of net position. So looking at sewer, you had about $2.8 million of total assets on hand at the end of the year. But you can see about a third of the way down under non-current assets, you have an asset category called fixed assets for about $2.2 million. So fixed assets are not liquid. So that would be the actual sewer plant itself and all the major infrastructure assets associated with the plant. That's not liquid. You can't pay bills with fixed assets. So even though you had about $2.8 million in assets in sewer, about $2.2 million of those assets were tied up in those non-liquid assets. You can see you had about $186,000 of liabilities against the assets in sewer to finish the year with an ending net position of about $2,625,000. But if you notice at the bottom, there are two categories of net position. You have invested in fixed assets. So that's the portion of your net position that's tied up in those non-liquid assets. So focusing on unrestricted, which is the liquid part of your net position, you can see was at about $395,000. Water, you can see a similar situation. Water fund had about $9.5 million of assets, but again, if you look, over $8 million of those assets are tied up in those non-liquid assets, the water plant and all the major infrastructure assets associated with the plant. You had about $662,000 of liabilities against the assets and finished the year with an ending net position of about $8.8 million. But again, focusing on the liquid part of the net position for water, that sat at about $805,000 at the end of June 30, 2024. Moving on to the next slide. This is the income statement for the water and sewer. You can see sewer fund generated about $462,000 of operating revenues, another $223,000 of what we refer to as non-operating revenues, and you spent about $874,000 in sewer. So you had a loss in your sewer fund of about $189,000 during 2024. Moving over to water, you can see you generated about $1,261,000 in operating revenues. Another $218,000 in what we call non-operating revenues. You spent about $1.5 million in water, so you had a slight loss in water of about $23,000 during 2024. On the last slide, I really wanted to draw everyone's attention to this because I think it's gonna be critical, especially for the 24-25 fiscal year for the city of Algonac. So we recommend that the city adopt what we call a federal grants policy. This is gonna be critical with all the projects that the city has going on currently. So we recommend that the city have written procedures in place for the compliance areas required under the uniform guidance. So this is required of anyone who is receiving and spending down federal funds, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Because sometimes federal funds can appear as if they're coming from the county or the state, but they're actually being passed through and they actually originate from the federal government, and you do have some of that going on currently. So you are required to have procedures relating to the allowability of costs. So each federal grant program actually has very specific requirements in how the funds can be used. Procurement, so that's talking about purchasing, what's your purchasing policy over federal programs. Conflicts of interest, cash management, and requesting federal payments, and these should all be documented in what we call a federal grants policy. These procedures strengthen internal controls and oversight over federal funds and are required of all agencies receiving federal funds. So this is gonna be critical for this fiscal year. The city has a lot of great things going on, right? You have the pool project, which has some funding tied into it. You have the community center renovations. You also have the TMF grant I saw that you were awarded through Eagle. That's actually originated from the federal government. That's part of the ARPA program. So the city will have a substantial amount of what I believe are federal funds coming through the accounting records for the 24-25 fiscal year. So what ends up happening is once you spend enough federal funds, you are actually required to have what we call a single audit. So this is an audit on top of your financial statement audit. So the sole purpose of this audit is for an independent auditor to come in and look and make sure that you are in compliance with all of the requirements of that particular program. And as I mentioned to Alicia, the first thing we always do when we come in is we ask, okay, can you hand me your federal grants policy? That's always the first step. So you wanna make sure that you have that federal grants policy in place and adopted to assist with that process. So that it's gonna be critical for this year for the city of Algonac to have that in place. On another note, I just wanna talk about our audit process briefly. The city did a great job, Alicia, Denise, getting us all the information that we needed. They were very cooperative. I know, Alicia, this was your first time going through this on your own.
That's right.
I think last year, on the tail end of it, you were on it, but this was all on Alicia. And again, she was very helpful. She was very cooperative. I think she did an outstanding job, considering this is her first time going through it on her own. And again, we're in constant communication with her. I always encourage everyone, certainly Alicia, our audit really is an ongoing process throughout the year. Really, we can't perform an effective audit if we just come in after the year is over, and that's the first time we've seen everything. So, we encourage communication with the city throughout the year, and that really helps us understand what is going on. And then, if Alicia's contacting us throughout the year, she's able to, ask questions, which we are certainly allowed to, provide assistance on. And that really heads off any problems early in the year, so they don't become problems after the year is over and they can't be fixed. So, again, Alicia's really good at also at doing that and communicating with us. Again, it was a very positive process on our end, so I think Alicia and Denise and the whole city office should be commended on that.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions for me?
I'm curious about the federal grant policy. Is that something that is usually recommended and is put into place by a lot of municipalities?
Yes,
It is, okay.
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
and like you said, this is a year that we're getting hooray, all kinds of them, but, that's good, that's awesome, actually.
And I
And
know
now,
you'll-
will that come in as, when you do your year, when you come to us and give us your audit presentation, will that, since it's a separate audit, will that be included in,
Yes, in fact, that audit gets a separate report.
okay,
So there'll be a financial statement report, and then there's a separate report called the single audit report.
okay,
So it's almost like we're providing an opinion over another, in this case, it'd be over compliance over federal funds.
okay. And one more, is that separate audit submitted to the treasury for the state?
It is, so similar to the audit, it gets submitted separately to the Michigan Department of Treasury. In addition to that, it has to be submitted to the federal government.
Okay,
So a copy of the single audit report, and we also have to complete what they call a data collection form
Mhm.
that gets submitted to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. So there are a couple of additional submissions that are required in a single audit.
Okay. Cool.
And you're absolutely right on the funding. What's happening is everyone's now trying to spend down their ARPA funds because they're required. So it's being pushed down
yeah,
is what's happening.
exactly. But I didn't realize that was a separate
Mhm.
audit. And, I mean, that's great, that's wonderful, so everyone can see what's going on with this federal fund and that federal fund and ARPA funds. So, cool, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Mayor, I'm sure that our city manager's probably already knowing where she is working on that policy.
Oh, I'm sure, I
Alright.
was just curious
Yeah.
in general.
Mrs. Gerstenberg, did you have something? No.
Thank you, Mayor Gillis. Yes, Councilman Bembas, you are correct, we are working on it. I believe there is usually a threshold, so you could get a small amount of federal dollars without triggering a single audit, but because we are getting so much
Right.
federal dollars, that's why we have to have this new policy in place,
That's
so
correct.
everybody has to have the
Yeah,
policy.
that's why I was
absolutely
curious
correct.
if this was
Yeah.
something that, cause like I said, we are just getting, and it's a good thing, getting all of this federal money. I just wasn't sure if it was everybody, so that's awesome they do that, so.
A lot of new people are being subject to single audit that weren't currently.
Oh, I'm sure.
And Denise, you're absolutely right, the current threshold is if you spend at least $750,000, and ironically, the rule is changing where the limit is increasing to $1 million, but that doesn't take effect until, I believe, after your current fiscal year, but
Okay.
the limit does change to $1 million shortly.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
good to know.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Mr. McBride.
thank you
Great
for your
job.
time.
Thank you, sir, awesome again.
Alicia, congratulations, great job.
Thank you, Alicia.
All right. Let's, moving on, public comment. Anybody would like to get up and speak before the council? You have 5 minutes to speak. Mr. McBride, you wanna get back up?
I don't think anyone else. wants
Alicia,
to
you
say
wanna
anything.
do your acceptance speech?
There, yeah, I like it, that's good.
All right, since we have no public comment, city manager report, Mrs. Gerstenberg.
Thank you, Mayor Gillis. I'll begin with the update for the Algonac Activity Center. We are still waiting for that funding agreement from the state before we proceed with awarding the roof contract. We were hoping to hear something in early December. We had not, so we are expecting to hear something any day. Some of the HVAC work has started. An update on the pool, the sanitary sewer tap has been completed and we received the pool permit from the state of Michigan on Christmas Eve. The swale and Cartwright drains, the county will be working on the swale and Cartwright drains this winter. Residents with any questions should contact the county drain office. The Cartwright drain is near Fruit Street and the swale drain is actually in Clay Township. Scarbeck's spontaneous Christmas golf cart parade on December 22nd. I understand that there were 54 participants that drove through the city spreading holiday cheer, and we have had many positive comments on social media. So thank you for organizing that.
Yeah, so
It
I was
was-
last minute.
It was cool, I was watching you guys go up Market Street, and it just kept going and going and going,
Yeah, I'll be
Very
following
nice.
next year.
very
It was
nice.
Jake.
And an update on the Downriver Goodfellows. The Downriver Goodfellows once again partnered with Woodside Bible Church for the food giveaway and provided food to approximately 255 families. They also provided Christmas help to 77 families, which were 247 people, including 154 kids. The Algonac Lions Club held a bowling fundraiser for the Downriver Goodfellows at Colony Bowl on December 8th. But the amount of the funds raised has not been posted yet and has not yet been distributed to the Downriver Goodfellows, so we don't know what exactly happened yet. And that is all, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Any questions for Mrs. Gerstenberg? I just have a quick one. The Flag and Riverfront Park, I've been getting some concerns about it not being at half staff. Mrs. Gerstenberg?
Thank you, Mayor Gillis. So that is a huge flag. It takes two people to lower that flag, and when the winds are at a certain speed, they cannot lower it.
So it's a
Too dangerous, yeah.
safety issue. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Are the offices, city offices open on Thursday?
This Thursday?
Okay, okay. Federal offices are closed.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're open.
Okay, so, garbage delivery will be normal.
Normal delivery, yeah.
Okay, don't mail any letters on Thursday.
So we're not gonna, I'm not gonna get any bills in there.
You're not getting any bills on Thursday.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Gerstenberg. Moving on to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda consists of the regular city council minutes of December 17th, 2024, and miscellaneous approval of purchase, miscellaneous business approval purchase of curb boxes for $2,480. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We have no unfinished business, so we're moving on to new business. Item 11A is to approve DTE Energy right-of-way agreements at 1833 Michigan, Lions Field Community Swimming Pool. DTE Energy has requested that the city grant 2 overhead and underground utility easements for the new utilities recently installed with the new community swimming pool project. One agreement is for a 12-foot easement on lot 71 to 74. The other agreement is for a 12-foot easement on lot 1 to section 3. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve DTE Energy right-of-way agreements at 1833 Michigan and direct the city manager to sign the agreements on behalf of the city.
Support.
Comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, could I have a roll call, please?
Councilman Bembas,
Yes.
Councilman Carter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davey,
Yes.
Mayor Gillis,
Yes.
Councilwoman Harris,
Yes.
Councilwoman Meldrum,
Yes.
Councilman Scarback.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 11B is to approve the Algonac Pool Project Pay Application Number 3 for $192,358.89. We have a pay application for the Algonac Pool Project. Architect George G. Hartman reviewed the application for accuracy of accounting and construction completion percentages. The application covers the billing period from November 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024. City Council awarded this project on August 20th, 2024 to low bidder Robert Clancy Contracting in the amount of $2,924,301. The city budgeted $1 million for the construction project for fiscal year 2023-2024. Additional monies will be received from the State of Michigan Senate Bill number 747, thanks to Senator Kevin Hertel, a Michigan National Resource Trust grant of $300,000, and a Michigan Economic Development grant of $400,000. The city will need to budget an additional $224,301 for fiscal year 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve Algonac Pool Project Pay Application Number 3 to Robert Clancy Contracting in the amount of $192,358.89.
Second.
Comments, questions, concerns?
Yay, power for the.
Mrs. Gerstenberg, is the pool on schedule? I just know he's under the weather, so I just wanted.
Wow, I was waiting.
This one, silence.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Gerstenberg.
Appreciate that.
Oh,
Thank you.
Saved your voice.
Yes.
See, now I wouldn't have done that, but I would have good job.
Hearing none, do I still need to do a roll call?
Yes.
I do, don't I? Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilman Carter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davey,
Yes.
Mayor Gillis,
Yes.
Councilwoman Harris,
Yes.
Councilwoman Meldrum,
Yes.
Councilman Scarback,
Yes.
Councilman Bembas.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Next up, we have accounts payable.
Make a motion to approve accounts payable and payroll in the amount of $471,13.
Support.
Questions, concerns? Hearing none, could I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Davey,
Yes.
Mayor Gillis,
Yes.
Councilwoman Harris,
Yes.
Councilwoman Meldrum,
Yes.
Councilman Scarback,
Yes.
Councilman Bembas,
Yes.
Councilman Carter.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Items for next agenda, Mrs. Gerstenberg?
Thank you, Mayor Gillis. We will have the acceptance of a grant we were recently notified for the fire department. Possibly a lease agreement with, for the wastewater treatment plant, an introduction ordinance amendment regarding golf carts. Sheriff Matt King will be here for his annual presentation, and assessing has asked us to approve the 2025 poverty exemption guidelines.
Thank you. Council comments, Councilman Douglas?
Excuse me, just real quick. Well done, Alicia. You should be proud of yourself. We're proud of you. And January 15th at 5 o'clock at Lutheran Church's community supper, community dinner. And the Bechtel family is sponsoring it this week, and they are cooking their world famous sliders. So, and there will also be soup and tater tots and a whole bunch of good stuff, so hopefully we see everybody out there.
Councilman Carter?
Again, thanks for a great job. Thank you, McBride and Manley, for coming by. Lots of great, things happening in the city. I drive by the pool just about every day and see that they're continually working on it, which is amazing. Even in the cold weather, there's still great things happening. As it's getting a little colder, and our city, I wanted to make a mention that, our DPW, even in the cold weather, in the middle of the night, and snow coming, appreciate seeing them out working hard when we're all trying to sleep, so, that's what I have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Davey?
Thank you. First, Happy New Year, everybody. Alicia, awesome job. It took me a minute, cause then that's right, this is your first audit. Wow, impressive, thank you so much. Denise, thank you. That was a very good audit. Thank you. You guys, I'm sure that having these guys makes it a lot easier, not easier, but a lot better than some other, cause every time, the work that you guys do with the city is awesome. I didn't do as much as I would normally do with, the Arc of St. Clair County's Show the Love, but fair warning, kids, Show the Love is coming up. You better hide, because I've been known to hunt people down for any kind of contributions, anything that we can help for our auction. We're looking forward to having a really awesome event this year. I didn't hit up as many people as I did last year, and trust me, it wasn't just because I was, cutting some people's a break. I just had other things to do. This year I don't have so much, so fair warning, kids, I will be hitting everybody up. That's all I got. That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
Confirmations?
One
Confirmation?
last thing.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna do one more thing.
Perfect.
Cause I have a headache, so, that's all.
I have a lot, so.
Councilwoman.
See, there you go. I made
Councilwoman-
time for Councilwoman Harris.
Councilwoman Harris.
Thank you everyone for coming and express my condolences to Tim Raymond and his family for his loss. I wanna thank Denise for the last year, her running of the town and the departments, her insight into the Ballards, so that our town can be safe during special events that we have every year. Congratulations, Alicia, you did a really good job. Where else am I? There's, a pancake breakfast at the VFW Hall on the 19th for the, Boy Scouts and for the FOP, it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. Golly, I think I'm done.
What?
I think I'm done.
It's just a
Wow.
kind of week.
What the heck?
Yeah, Happy New Year.
And don't anybody think that this is how the rest of 2025 is gonna go. It's, you know, fair warning.
Councilwoman Beltran.
Congratulations to Alicia and your staff for a great audit, and, thank you to Manley McBride for your services.
Thank you. Councilman Scarback.
Congratulations, Alicia. That was awesome. I couldn't even imagine how hard it would be to do all that, so that's a tremendous job. I also wanna say Happy New Year, and we did that first golf cart parade this year. It kind of just spontaneously happened, and I'm not gonna say it was a shit show in the beginning, but, you know, we figured itself out.
Which you already did.
Yeah.
It's all good.
And so we figured it out, so next year will be a lot better, we'll be more organized. I think we're gonna start it next year at the Lions Field, bring the county stage in, make like a little evening out of it, do a parade around town, do some cool things out of it, but the feedback, I would say, mostly positive, so we'll definitely do another one, and, yeah, that's all I got. Thank you guys for coming.
On that, I'll start mine off with great job on the parade.
Thank you.
It was a blast. Couldn't believe how, I was on the trailer right behind him in the motorhome and all of a sudden I'm on there with a few kids and they go, oh my gosh, guys, it's still going, it's still going. It was huge, so it was amazing.
I was
My-
flashing my lights on and on.
My mom cried.
Really?
Yeah, so it meant a lot to her just to go by, so great job with that. Alicia, great job, thank you. I wanna go into the Algonac Clay Community Fund has a new raffle. It is for an electric bike, they are $10, the Algonac Clay Community Fund is a local fund that does help put on a lot of, all we do is raise money to give it away. Like, we've given away money to the dinner, pretty much to the historical society, to most of the local causes. Every year, all we do is, we have a fund that we give the money away, so if anybody would like to buy some tickets, they're $10. You can see me, or Mrs. Gerstenberg, or Councilman Dundas. I didn't forget about you.
Thank you.
Cause he's so quiet.
I'd like to give my condolences also to the family of Tim Raymond. And another family that we lost, Greg Bilecki this past week.
Oh, yes.
And if you didn't know Greg, if you don't know who Greg was, you knew the sight of him when you drove through town and he was sitting there with Princess, and right in front of the Coast Guard dock there, in front of the statue, he was there hours on end. And you know, when I talked to the Coasties, they said to me that Greg was one of their favorite reasons for coming to Algonac, because he always welcomed them.
Nice guy.
So, I'd like to give a shout out to Greg, he was a great guy. And my last shout out, Mr. Carter. Did you do something recently?
Oh, that's
I
right.
did.
Mr. Carter got married.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, I'd just like to congratulate you and Grace. And with that, I think I'm done.
Wendy?
Motion to adjourn at, 6:47, I'm sorry, 6:37.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.